Everything you've been taught about Black history in America is wrong. What if I told you Africans were sailing to America thousands of years before Columbus, building, trading, and thriving? This is the story they never wanted you to hear. Please follow to encourage our efforts so that we can bring more interesting things to you. Long before Columbus ever dreamed of sailing the ocean blue, before the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria touched American shores, there were people here. And not just any people. There's growing evidence suggesting that Black people, African explorers, were present in the Americas thousands of years before Columbus was even born. Let that sink in. Black history in America doesn't start with slavery. It doesn't begin in 1619. It begins long before, with ancient seafarers, traders, and builders. Today, we dive into a powerful story hidden in plain sight, a story that challenges what we've been taught in schools and rewrites the narrative of who really came to America first. This narrative shatters the limited framework many have been taught in school. The story of African history in the Americas is not about servitude, but about strength, innovation, and legacy. There are oral histories passed down in indigenous tribes describing dark-skinned visitors arriving peacefully and contributing knowledge, goods, and customs. Not only does this story give dignity back to the African diaspora, but it also reclaims a legacy that was buried. For centuries, history was controlled by colonial powers that crafted a narrative of superiority, where Africa was seen as a land of poverty and ignorance. But the truth is far more powerful. Modern archaeological findings, ancient texts, and even the words of early European explorers hint at a different tale. One where African mariners crossed oceans, interacted with native cultures, and contributed to the shaping of early American civilization. Many assume ancient Africans stayed within the borders of their continent. But history tells us otherwise. In West Africa, the Great Mali Empire once stood as a beacon of wealth, learning, and exploration. According to Arab historians like Al-Amari, a Malian emperor named Abubakar II gave up his throne in the 14th century to explore the Atlantic Ocean. He believed other lands lay across the water. He loaded 2,000 ships with men, food, water, and gold, and vanished. Where did he go? Some historians and researchers believe his expedition reached the Americas hundreds of years before Columbus. Ancient accounts describe Africans interacting with indigenous tribes in Central and South America. These weren't accidental drifters. They were skilled sailors guided by the stars and ocean currents. The Malians were known for their advanced understanding of astronomy and navigation. Their boats, often made of hardwood and capable of long-distance travel, would have used the same Atlantic currents later used by Columbus. One of the strongest pieces of supporting evidence lies in oceanic science itself. The Canary Current flows from West Africa directly to the Americas, making such a journey highly plausible. Further support comes from the journals of early European explorers who arrived in the Americas and were told by native tribes about Black men who had come from the East in boats, trading in gold-tipped spears. Modern scholars and researchers like Dr. Ivan van Sertima have connected the dots between these ancient maritime journeys and the presence of African cultural elements in the Americas. The idea that Africans were global navigators is not fiction. It's simply a part of history that has been long overlooked or intentionally ignored. So the next time someone says Columbus discovered America, you can remind them others were here first, and some of them looked like us. Now, let's talk about one of the most mysterious clues of all, the Olmec heads. In the jungles of Mexico, 17 massive stone heads have been discovered, some over 9 feet tall and weighing more than 20 tons. These heads date back to 1200 BCE. That's more than 2,000 years before Columbus. But here's what's truly shocking. The facial features on these heads are unmistakably African. Broad noses, full lips, and rounded cheeks. Could the Olmecs, one of the earliest known civilizations in Mesoamerica, have had African origins or African influence? Mainstream historians say the Olmecs were indigenous people, but some researchers argue the features carved into these massive stones suggest African visitors left their mark. or even part of Olmec society. Add to that the presence of similar architectural styles, pyramid structures, and spiritual symbols shared across ancient Africa and the Americas, and the mystery deepens. One theory posits that African sailors arrived and merged with local populations, sharing knowledge and technology. The result was a fusion culture, Olmec civilization, that showed traits of both African and indigenous American worlds. These were not primitive societies. They built complex cities, developed writing systems, and created calendars with astonishing accuracy. In addition to the stone heads, artifacts bearing African stylistic elements have been uncovered, including sculptures, pottery, and tools. When examined side by side with African artifacts from the same time period, the similarities are hard to ignore. Could this be direct evidence of African presence in ancient America? Many believe it is. Even more compelling are the oral histories from Mesoamerican tribes that speak of dark-skinned visitors from faraway lands who brought tools, language, and spiritual wisdom. This isn't science fiction. It's a puzzle history is still solving. And every new discovery brings us one step closer to understanding just how connected the ancient world truly was. Beyond stone statues, biological evidence also adds weight to the theory of an early African presence in America. Archaeologists have uncovered skeletal remains in South and Central America with skull shapes more similar to African and Australoid populations than modern Native Americans. In Brazil, the remains of a woman named Luzia, dated to be over 11,000 years old, showed features typically found in people of African or Melanesian descent. Let that number sink in, 11,000 years ago. And in 1972, American researcher Dr. Ivan van Sertima rocked the academic world with his book, They Came Before Columbus. He cited linguistic, botanical, and architectural similarities between African and American civilizations. His claims sparked controversy, but also opened the door for future generations to question mainstream narratives. Modern DNA studies have also uncovered unusual genetic markers among some indigenous groups in the Americas, suggesting ancient contact with African populations. Though this science is still evolving, it raises a powerful question. Have we overlooked thousands of years of shared history? Let's look beyond the physical evidence and dive into cultural parallels. Many ancient American civilizations, like the Maya, Aztec, and Inca, built pyramids, practiced advanced astronomy, and developed complex calendars. These are also hallmarks of ancient African civilizations, particularly Egypt and Mali. Some symbols and religious practices, such as sun worship, ancestor veneration, and the concept of duality, can be found across both continents. African cotton seeds have been found in prehistoric American burial sites. Even African plants like the banana and yam have shown up in South America before European colonization. Coincidence? Or a sign of ancient trade routes across the Atlantic? The truth is, civilizations across the Atlantic may have influenced each other, shared knowledge, and even lived together. These ideas are just beginning to be explored seriously in historical and academic circles. But to many people of African descent, these stories feel like truth rediscovered. If this evidence has been around for decades, why didn't we learn this in school? That's a question many ask when they first hear about pre-Columbian Black history in America. The answer lies in who controls the narrative. For centuries, history was written by European colonizers who had every reason to erase stories of African greatness and early exploration. Teaching that Black people arrived in America as slaves supports a very narrow narrative. But acknowledging an ancient Black presence here, full of builders, navigators, and scientists, shatters that image. Colonial powers did not want the world to know about African exploration, innovation, or global influence. Instead, they built a false timeline. Africa was backward, Europe was advanced, and Columbus discovered America. But now, with modern tools, independent scholars, and a global thirst for truth, the story is being rewritten. And people, especially Black youth, are rediscovering their roots not as victims, but as pioneers. So what do we do with this knowledge? We reclaim the narrative. We talk about Abu Bakari's great voyage. We show the Olmec heads to our children. We ask questions in classrooms. We create documentaries, YouTube channels, TikToks, and books that tell the truth. We understand that Black history in America did not begin with chains. It began with sails, with exploration, with courage. The ancestors were not just brought here. Some of them were already here, thriving, building, and blending cultures long before Columbus sailed across the Atlantic. This story isn't just about the past. It's about identity. It's about pride. And it's about the future. Because when you know where you came from, you walk taller into where you're going. If this story moved you, share it. Comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget, history isn't always what they told us. Sometimes it's even greater.